different data which we are collecting from different sources. Okay, so geospatial data acquired using different sources includes GPS, remote sensing, which I have told you in the previous lecture also, aerial photography, surveying, if you are doing any kind of survey from the field, if you have any map is available, census and surveys, so all that we have to give to the geographical database, and then we can process that in a GIS. So now coming to the whole structure of GIS. So GIS is nothing but a technique in which we can input the data, we can create the database, we can manage that database, we can analyze that, modeling that, and we can then give an output in the form of maps or tables. Input also we can have either in the form of maps or tables. Okay, so it means GIS can handle spatial as well as non-spatial. Spatial with specific to any location. Like if I am talking hydrology terms, then my rain gauge location or rain gauge is a spatial data, point data. The rainfall in that particular rain gauge is non-spatial or attribute of that. So this is the capability of GIS that can handle both spatial and non-spatial. No other software can handle both at a time. Like CAD. CAD can handle designs. Okay, but here we can handle both spatial and non-spatial. And here you can see that spatial is in two forms, raster and vector, which we will discuss more, and attribute that is in the form of tables. Okay, so whatever data we are feeding in spatial form, that we have to link with the non-spatial, and we can create the maps. Like simple example is rainfall. If you have a rain gauge map and rainfall map of say monthly or daily or annual, whatever it is, so we can create monthly or daily rainfall maps with the help of location as well as the rainfall data which is stored in the table. Okay, so this way we can handle all the database in a GIS for some of the work. Now before proceeding further, we can see the two structure which we can handle in a GIS. So there are two structures, one is vector, another is raster. So vector is nothing but our spatial data model approaches for storing the spatial location of geographical feature in a database. So vector storage implies the use of vectors, directional lines, to represent a geographical feature. While in raster, that raster data models incorporate the use of grid cells. That is data structure where the geographic area is divided into cells identified by row and column, which you have seen in the last lecture. So all the satellite data is in the form of raster, which I will show you. So this data structure is commonly called as raster. Okay, so there are two types of structure. Here you can see the difference. So if we are representing a point with a point, then it is vector. If we are representing that by a grid, then it is a raster. So we can say that vector structure is actual representation or real world representation, because you know that point if we are giving, then point of course is a point or line is a line. If we are converting that into grid form, then there will be certain distortion. So it is not a real. So boundary here you can see in vector is real. While if you are converting that into a raster, then it is deformed. It is not the actual representation. But we can say that vector and raster more or less the same if we are taking a grid size appropriately. Okay, if final grid size we are taking, then we can say that vector and raster will give me more or less the same area. If I am talking about the watershed. Length. Point is of course point. Okay, so that way we can present the raster and vector. So here you can see again vector and raster data form. So real world, as I told that it is in this form, which clearly you can see on the right side, that is vector representation. The same thing in raster we can present like this. So if we are talking about vector, so we can say that coverage, set of map features, annotation, text labeling. So it is the Vector format is little bit more complicated if I compare it with the raster. In raster, we can say that a particular grid is this row and this column. Why here we cannot do that? We can say it is made of nodes and points or ticks when we are talking about in terms of GIS or when we are digitizing all that. Okay, so we cannot say like this polygon is how we can define that. While in grid we can define easily by row and column. Okay, so here it is a representation in a map, different units. While the same thing, if we are converting into raster, then if we overlay a grid, suppose, on that map of vector, and then again we have digitized that. If the area is coming in more than half of the pixel, then we will include that into that particular grid. If it is coming less than that, then we will exclude that. Okay, in that way, the vector we can convert into a raster. So here, the same thing is now represented by the pink color 1. So it is this is the raster representation of this one. So you can see some of the distortion, but the same thing we can present in raster. Now, in the last lecture, I have shown you that remote sensing data is being collected that is in the form of pixel. So here you can visualize it. The concept of grid or pixel is nothing but in the form of grid. So all the satellite data is collected in the form of grids. When we display that on a screen, then we can visualize that as a picture or image. Okay. So every grid is represented by a number depending upon the characteristic of that particular pixel in which it is falling. So if it is falling in water body, then the value will be less. So this grid and the size of that grid represents the spatial resolution. So all the raster data, if you visualize that after zooming it, then you can visualize that it is in the raster. But if you are displaying a very large area on a screen, then you can say that you cannot see it in a grid form. But if you zoom it, then you can see that the same data is in the form of grid. Okay, and as I have said, that each grid is represented by a number. So this is a raster data, and therefore most of the analysis in our hydrology in which we are using remote sensing, we are preferring raster based GIS. Okay, though we can interchange raster to vector, vector to raster easily, like you can see here. So if you see vector to grid conversion like this way and different features or different bodies, then you will get the last one. If you convert that again into raster, means if you visualize that into raster. Okay, so if you want to convert vector to grid and then again grid to vector, you can do that in any software. So the most of the software are having capability to convert a vector map into raster map and raster map into vector map. Because whenever we are converting our database or creating our database in a GIS, then it is most of the time in vector form. But if you have to handle it with respect to your satellite data and your raster, then you have to convert that into raster form. Okay, so you can see that now the first and last, they both are vector. But because we have converted from vector, raster, therefore some distortion is there. So you need not to worry whether your data is in vector form or raster form. From whatever source you have taken, you can easily handle them into a particular software. Now, there are different components as I have told you in GIS. So first component is data input, and that is the most time consuming task in a GIS. With the help of open source data or the public domain data, now the task is easy. But earlier, when we started working in GIS, at that time no data was available in public domain. All the data we have to create ourselves. So at that time we were giving more and more time to GIS, data input in comparison to analysis and modeling of that. But nowadays we can save some of the time because that data is available freely. Because, like, if I am working on a particular project and my study area is common to other person who is also working for other purpose. So he is also creating database, I am also creating database. Or third person is also creating database. So all of us are creating, giving more and more time to data. So if one is sharing their data with other through some public domain or through some other way, then we can save time because already their data has been created. Only thing, sometimes we require to change the format of their database according to the software which I am using. So now that part is also not very difficult because all the software which we are using means maybe I am using another software. So all the software are having import and export facility. So I can import the data which has been created in another format in which I am using their software. So GIS data input basically is the procedure of importing data into a computer readable form and writing data to the GIS database. If it is not in that format, suppose you are having Survey of India topographical maps which are not in digital form and you have to convert them into digital form or any other map which has been collected by you from, say, some source. So that is our first requirement. All the data we have to bring into digital form. So building GIS database could be costly and time consuming, especially for highly accurate GIS databases. So documentation also is also important. GIS data input include also the attribute or non-spatial data input, locational or spatial data input, linking locational data with attribute data. So what is attribute? As I have given you an example of rain gauge, so mainly through manual keyboard or Excel sheet, suppose you are having. So that is attribute. I know that my rain gauge is located at a particular point, and I am having daily rainfall data of that in Excel sheet. So I can convert that Excel sheet into digital, this GIS. Okay. So although also through existing digital files, spreadsheet, databases, or other digital files, assign a unique ID to each entity, etc. So all that attribute data I can easily handle through this way. Locational data input I can enter through manual keyboard entry. Coordinate geometry I can do. Manual digitizing we can do. Scanning, aerial photograph and satellite imageries nowadays all of them are available in digital form. I have collected some data through GPS, other digital spatial data. So all that is spatial. Now suppose you are not having any particular map in a digital format. So how you can convert that into digital format? Either through digitizing or scan. So earlier we have used digitizer also, but nowadays because we have sophisticated scanners with us, so we need not to go for this little bit cumbersome process of digitization. But in case we have to digitize manually, then we have to use this kind of cursor which we have to move on that particular feature or point or polygon, then we can create that into a system. Okay, so that way also we did number of maps we have converted into digital form earlier through this procedure. It is little bit, I cannot say difficult, but time consuming and cumbersome because we have to digitize each and every entity in a GIS. Okay. So as I said now, the highly sophisticated scanners are available, AGO size scanners are available. So we have to scan the data. So scanning provides a fast means of data entry, then manual digitizing. That is one thing. In scanning, a digital image of the map is produced by moving an electric detector across the map surface. Using a scanner, flatbed scanner, if we can put our data or map in that flatbed scanner, so that can convert that map into digital image. Then we require raster to vector conversion. because all the data which you will generate through scanning will be in raster. Okay, suppose you have converted your survey of India topographical maps and it is having, say, roads, rivers, railway line, etc. So how it will appear there? In raster. But like contours also. So if you want contour in vector form, then you have to convert raster to vector. Okay, so we can do that because if we require our contour map in vector format, then we have to do that. So we can say that scanning is faster if our map, which we have scanned, is in a perfect form. Perfect format means, suppose my Survey of India topographical map, which is having roads, railway line, rivers, then city, then contours, so many features. And if I am converting that into raster or scanning, then all the layers will come as one unit. Then it will be very difficult for me to have all these layers separate. If I can do that before scanning, then it is easy. So with the help of a draftsman or by other way, if I can have all these layers with me separately, very clearly demarcated on map, and then I am scanning, then my job on a system will be very easy. So I need not to spend that much of time to have different layers if that work can be done by a draftsman or a junior person. Okay, so if I am having all the maps in a perfect format, then scanning is a very faster means of converting our data into digital form. Now, once I have converted my data or map into digital form, what will happen? The map which I am having on my table is converted into system. That's all. Now I can see the same map in my system. That's all. So scanning has converted that and given that map into my system, and I can visualize that on my screen. But that is not sufficient because that map is having certain coordinates, certain XY value. So what I have to do? I have to give that XY value to that map. That is one thing. Okay, so that coordinate I have to give, and I have to give also a reference system for a map projection. What is that map projection? A map projection is any system designed to represent the surface of a sphere or spheroid, such as the Earth, on a plane. I am projecting our spheroid or sphere on a planar surface. Therefore, I have to give a projection system. So there are a number of different map projection methods. Since flattening a sphere to a plane causes distortion to the surface, each map projection system comprises accuracy between certain properties such as conservation of distance, angle, or area. So that's why I have to give certain projection system also. So it means whenever I am converting my map into digital format, it will come as a picture or JPEG or TIFF format, I can say, or BMP format. Okay, so that is one thing. Now, if I am giving a coordinate system, it means I have placed one coordinate system on that map and a projection system which is readily available in that particular software. So what is the advantage of that? If suppose I am getting another map from other source which I have not digitized, or I have taken from satellite, because satellite data is also not having any coordinate system or projection system. It is made of grids. So with the help of this map, which I have scanned and given a proper coordinate system and projection system, I can convert my secondary maps, which I am using in a GIS, and I can georeference that map with this particular map which I have created myself. Alright, so in GIS, I have to take care that all the maps which I have taken from different sources, I have to bring to a common platform. Means I have to have the same coordinate system and projection system on all the bands. Then only I can say that if I am overlaying all these bands, then they will match with each other. Otherwise, I cannot say that my this one feature on one map is falling over the same area, the same thing on the other map. Suppose I have taken a Survey of India sheet in which I can see the different features. And now I have taken the same area from satellite. So their orientation is different. So I have to bring the satellite data on the same platform in which I have digitized or scanned my Survey of India topography. Then only I can say that we were in satellite data as well as on Survey of India topo sheet falling over each other. Okay, so this is one of the exercise. Before doing any GIS exercise, I have to do in every step. So this is my first part. That is to give a proper coordinate system and projection system and to bring all the database on the same platform. Like in our hydrology, we are using soil map and which we are getting from National Bureau of Land Use and Soil Survey Nagpur. So they don't have any coordinate system and projection system. So I have to bring that also on the same. I have taken some data from say one of my friend, which is having different coordinate system and projection system. So I have to again reproject that on the same platform. So I need to say whatever source is there, that's okay. That is not a problem. But again, we have to do the same exercise with all the nodes. Once I am having my all the layers in the same platform, then only I can use them in my GIS exercise. Okay. Now, type of GIS also just briefly I will cover because we are using desktop GIS, web GIS, mobile GIS nowadays. Though most of the time we are using desktop GIS, but web GIS is also now common or advancement of mobile GIS. So desktop GIS, whatever I have told you, that is the desktop. We present the real world on a computer, limited to the desktop computer. Not everyone can access the applications. Desktop GIS functionalities, view data on a map, analyze data, create publication quality, professional maps, etc. And there are a number of software which will be covered in detail in another lecture. So the most common software which we are using nowadays in case of GIS is ArcGIS. That is or ESR, NVISA, MapInfo, free and open source, GRASS, Quantum GIS or QGIS. So it will give you some exposure on QGIS in detail so that you can understand how we can handle data in a GIS. There is another freely available software which is called as ILBIS, Integrated Land and Water Information System. In fact, we have started working on GIS through that software, but at that time it was not freely available. ILBIS is a software which is developed at Netherlands, ITC Netherlands, and then in 2006 onwards, they made it free. So now that software is freely available. So what is the advantage of ILBIS? It can handle vector and raster data both. Some of the software cannot handle both of them. One thing. Second thing, its image processing capability is also not that bad. Because some of the GIS software are not good in image processing. If you have to do image processing, then you have to do it elsewhere, like ADAS, Earth Resources Data Analysis System. So ADAS is one of the software which we are commonly using for our image processing. Okay, ArcGIS is not a free software, and it is a proprietary of software of ESRI, and it is a little bit expensive as compared to other software, MapInfo, etc. The advantage of ArcGIS in comparison to say, you can say that QGIS is freely available, then why I should go for ArcGIS? It is not that way, because freely available software, they are having certain limitation of capabilities. Like ArcGIS is most versatile software nowadays in the field of GIS. So therefore, if you are procuring that, spending money on that, it means we are getting a better GIS. One Indian software was also developed, but it was not very successful, perhaps by IIT Mumbai, because it was not so user friendly or so not so versatile in comparison to say at that time English, which was free or other software. So we have to see whether whatever software we are creating, it is having that much of capabilities or not. But I can say that quantum GIS is also not bad, and we can use it for number of purpose. Maybe some of the complicated exercise in GIS which we cannot handle in QGIS, we have to go for RGIS. And RGIS is, say, I can say, there are a number of modules which we have to have in RGIS. So if limited modules I am taking or procuring, then even then I have to spend about 10 lakhs of rupees. Okay, so therefore, QGIS or this type of GIS, if they can serve your purpose, they are good enough. Another is WebGIS. So WebGIS is a GIS distributed across a network computer environment to integrate, disseminate, and communicate geographic information usually on the web over the internet. So you have to give directly to this WebGIS your input, and you can and possible to process geo-related information with no location restrictions. So WebGIS, client-server architecture, distributed architecture. Then comes the mobile GIS. So it is similar to WebGIS. It is an integrated software hardware framework for the access of geospatial data and services through mobile devices via wireline or wireless networks. So mobile GIS can be taken as a sub-new research area in WebGIS, we can say. Okay, so address issues such as moving client side, wireless internet, etc. should be there, and we can then use mobile GIS. So locational based services, feed based GIS, etc. we can handle through mobile GIS. Now, why we are using GIS? Because whatever we are doing through GIS, we were doing earlier. In civil, like I have studied surveying and overlaying, so many things manually we were doing. So what are the major benefits? Why we are going for GIS? We can do most of the things like in hydrology we were doing exercise without GIS also. So we can do that, but this is the advancement. So data is stored in digital form, so physically more compact. Manual, say layers, if you are generating on a tracing sheet, then putting them, and after some time it is difficult to get them. Large quantities of data can be maintained and retrieved at a greater speed. If I am going for a physical based methods, then I can overlay say 2, 3, 4 sheets. Here, if I am creating 100 layers, I can handle that easily, and I can retrieve anything from those layers. So geospatial data better maintained in a standard format. Lower cost of maintaining and retrieving data. Revision and updating are easy. There, if on tracing sheet I am revising once, it is okay, but we cannot update regularly. Here, if I want to change anything, I have to delete and then again update. I can do that. Cohesion of complex spatial analysis. Geospatial data and information are easier to search, analyze, and represent. Because whatever data that is stored in digital form, I can do any analysis on that. We can share and exchange freely. Time and money are saved. It is better, quicker, more accurate answer for the community. So whatever inputs I was generating earlier with the help of physically based maths, now I am getting better output or more accurate output. So like in our field, we were using number of layers earlier or number of maps for our study. But I have seen, I will give you one example, simple example of that later on, where earlier we were spending a lot of time. Once we are using that, means we are taking the help of GIS, we can save a lot of time and we can get a better accurate map. Okay. So now comes the third dimension, which I have discussed in my previous lecture, but I have not explained, and that is height. If you have seen that Google Earth, you can visualize the 3D also there. How it is possible? It is possible because we have now digital elevation model. So digital elevation model is nothing but if I know the height of each and every point or creek in that map, then it is called a digital elevation model. So earlier we started working on DM using the first approach, interpolation of contour maps, derived from Survey of India topographical maps. I know that what is a contour? The line of a equal height. So I know the contour of say 100 meter, 120 meter, 140 meter, 160 meter or so. Okay, at an interval of 20 meters. So whatever grid is falling over that line, I know the height of that. But in between, what is the height? I don't know. There are a number of grids between two contours. If I am talking about the raster map. So if I am interpolating these maps, I can get height of say 120, 121, 122, 123 like that, up to 140. Okay, so that is nothing but simple interpolation. But it is again, I will say that very time consuming, and sometimes we have to digitize all the contours, give the value of each and every contour, and then we have to go for this interpolation. We did that earlier. But again, I will say that we were spending a lot of time on that. Once we are having this DM through satellite, then it has made our life easy. Why? Because the thing which we were creating through that interpolation and all those methods, we can save a lot of time. So there are two approaches of getting this DM. One is SRTM approach, another is stereo satellite approach. So some of the satellite, both are satellite approach, but the principle is different. In the first one, it is a microwave approach or SAR interferometer approach. What is that? You know that whatever we are talking in terms of remote sensing, that we are talking about the intensity. We are not talking about the phase. There are two characteristics of a energy beam. Phase is also there. So if with the help of phase, we can know the height of that particular point, then it is SRTM approach. And the second approach, maybe you are knowing that it is a stereoscope. If you are seeing from two different angles the same area, then you can visualize that in 3D. You have seen that. I can say that everybody has seen 3D films. So how you are visualizing that? Through space. So you are seeing the same object with two different angles. Therefore, you can visualize that 3D. If you put off your glasses, then you cannot see that in 3D. So that stereo satellite data approach is nothing but the same thing. So we are taking two images of the same area from two different angles. Like in our own satellite, that is Cartosat, Aster satellite. So they are example of stereo satellite. So we can create DM with the help of these two principles, and these two DMs or three DMs or four DMs, number of now DMs are free. Our own satellite, Cartosat, Indian satellite, earlier we were portraying two different images from NISC, and then we were using some specialized software to convert them into DM. But now NRC, National Remote Sensing Center, in the ISRO. Okay, so that way, if we are getting DM freely, then we need not to worry about the procedure of converting our digital maps, like using contour maps, etc., into D. Okay, but there are certain limitations, I will say. What are those limitations? Whatever height I am getting through these approaches, any approaches, they are not truly representing my actual topography. Means if I am standing on a point and I am computing height from this satellite, and if I am knowing the actual height of that particular point, they are not matching very well. There is an error of say around 5 to 6 or 7 meters. This is I am talking about the vertical accuracy. Horizontal resolution is 30 meter, 90 meter, 10 meter, 20 meter, whatever it is. So like Cartosat, I am having 20 meter freely available, 10 meter if I have to have, then I have to go for NRS. And they will supply me the satellite data or digital elevation model with certain cost. I will get it at a resolution of 10 meter horizontal. But again, the vertical accuracy is same, 5, 6 or 7 meter difference. Relative error may be less. Relative means if I am checking a number of points, I am getting more or less the same error. So relative error sometimes will be 0. So in some of the applications, relative error is okay. But like if I have to know how much area is inundated by a flood, then I need to know the actual topography. Otherwise, I cannot estimate the flood inundation areas through modeling. So there, these type of DMs, they are not sufficient. I have to go for better methods, and those methods are called as like drone survey. You know drone? If I have to fly that over an area, then I can get exactly the same height. Means maybe some centimeter error may be there. There is another approach of LiDAR survey. But for them, we have to take a flight over that area. So therefore, they are very expensive. Like LiDAR survey, if I have to do, that will cost me around 1 lakh to 1.5 lakh per square kilometer. While I am getting these beams free. So now in our ministry or under one of the project, that task has been given to Survey of India. So now they are creating a digital elevation model with these advanced approaches at a better accuracy. And I don't know whether they will be available in public domain or not. So if they are available freely, then again my task will be easy. I need not to spend any money. I need not to create a DM with high accuracy with my own resources. Okay, so the limitation is the height which I am getting through this DM, they are not accurate enough. I can improve my DM with the help of certain methods. Like I am having a DM of a particular area, if I am working on a small catchment or a small watershed. And I know height of certain points accurately, say 10 points, 20 points, 30 points, grids. Now with the help of these known heights, accurate heights, I can modify my DM which I am getting from these resources. I will convert that DM into a better DM. How? I know some of the points with exact the same height which is there. So I will replace those points in that map. And then again I will do the kriging or interpolation with the help of accurate values. So that way I can improve my original D up to certain extent. Say if my error is 7, then I can reduce it up to 3 meters. But I cannot go beyond that. So for that only I need to have certain advanced technologies. So there are other terms also for digital terrain model, digital surface model. They are synonymous, but there are certain defects. DSM is nothing but the top of tree or houses, while DTM is terrain. So it is giving me the height of the surface, the land. Okay, so this is about the topography which we can handle through, of course, satellite, but in GIS. So GIS, I can have X, Y, and Z. That you can see on Google Earth also. And if you visualize that through that, in the right corner, there is a toggle which you can use and you can then visualize that in 3D. So what Google Earth has done actually, they have provided the satellite data of the whole world and then a DEM like SRTA master or same thing, and they overlaid their satellite data on their DEM and they provided that on that nebular platform. Therefore, we can see the third dimension. So if I am talking about the GIS capabilities, then I can say retrieval, reclassification, measurement, overlay, distance, connectivity, neighborhood operation. So I can do, once I have created all these layers, I can do that easy. Retrieval, reclassification, length measurement, area measurement, whatever I want to do, I can do that. I have created a map in which I have given all the nodes of a particular district. I want to do the distance, length. Easily I can do it. Retrieval. Simple example is like if in my district I have done some sampling and I have done the water quality analysis. Now I want to know which pocket in that particular district is having water which is suitable for drink. So I know that certain criteria. pH should be this, chloride should be this, hardness should be this in this age. So I will give all that condition to the system where I am having all the layers of say hardness or chloride or pH or whatever it is. And I will put a condition. I want to retrieve the data having this much of range of hardness, this much of range of chloride, this much of range of fluoride. So my whole area will be classified into those classes which will fulfill this requirement. So retrieval I can do. If I want to overlay two maps, a simple example is land use, land cover and soil map, and I want to see under forest which soil is covered. So I will overlay these two maps. So I can overlay a number of maps, hundreds of maps. So this way I can do number of GIS capabilities. They are very easy capabilities. We can do in GIS number of other analysis which are required for say different purpose. Like in our case, hydrological modeling and other things. Okay, so there are number of capabilities. Now, whatever in hydrology we are doing only watershed or a catchment. Maybe some of you are knowing. It depends upon the topography. Every river is having a basin. Means the water falling over a particular area will contribute to that. So if I am saying that Ganga up to Haridwar, so there will be certain boundary. So whatever water is coming under that boundary will contribute at Haridwar. Other will go to Yamuna, which is adjacent river. So that way our country is divided into 21 major basins. Ganga basin, Yamuna basin. Okay, so the boundary of a watershed depends upon what? Topography. So once I am having a DL, I can draw my boundary easily. Here. So earlier the same exercise I was doing with the help of Survey of India topography units. So traditionally watershed delineation has been done manually using contour data on a topography units. Okay, you can see an outlet point. So up to that point, this river will contribute the water. Okay, and I have to know how much water is coming from that watershed. I have to do hydrological modeling to know that also. We are having measurements at certain locations, but not all. So what I have to do? First, I have to take the boundary of this. So earlier we were doing through this traditional approach. Now, only I have to give the outlet and that software will give me the boundary. So that is the advantage of GIS. So earlier the same thing I was doing manually, that boundary, traditional method. Okay, so this is a simple means example of a GIS that task is not easy. I may not to do that all that exercise, but only point I have to give, only thing I have to have this accurate input with me. Okay. So if I am talking about hydrology, because I will give you an example of hydrology only. I am working there and using GIS in this field. So there are a number of inputs if I am talking about water balance, precipitation is source of water, then it is infiltrating, it is going percolated to the groundwater, some waste flow is then coming to the stream, direct runoff is coming to the stream. If there is a snow cover area, then snow melt is also contributing to the stream flow. So I have to consider the snow cover area. So all that exercise, now I have to do through a software in which I want to know the land use land cover, I want to know the soil type, I want to know the topography. So in this simple water balance calculation, if I am adding all those layers, then I can estimate all those components easily. So inputs are topography, soil characteristics, land use land cover, meteorology means rainfall, etc., temperature, evaporation. Output is stream flow, subsurface flow, depth to water table because some of the water is going to the groundwater. So these are the output. So all that we can do in a GIS. So simple example, if I am talking about GIS is, I have to create all the data layers in a GIS, and then according to my need of that particular software or calculation, I have to use that. Okay. So what is the advantage? As I have told you, we have to have process representation in hydrological modeling and environmental description of that area. So earlier it was difficult, but now it is easy. So traditional approach, we were giving more weightage to the process representation rather than environmental description because we were not having. But once GIS is there, we can environmental description give more weightage and process representation less weightage. Special height. Okay, so we can improve. So now if I am talking about my, say, I will present that in detail in one of my lecture in this particular course. But I can say that if I am having remote sensing, GIS, digital elevation model and hydrological model, then I can solve number of problems which we are facing in case of water resources management or hydrology. Okay, so this is one example of GIS. And how? There are number of models in hydrology which I can use separately with the help of GIS, and GIS will give me certain inputs. That is one thing. The second way of integration is if I can create a database in GIS and we can apply that software in GIS itself. That is nothing called as a user interface. If anybody of you is working in field of water resources or hydrology, then you can understand that there are number of software now. They have interfaced with GIS, and now we are having interface of GIS and that particular software, and we can easily handle that software, hydrological software, with the help of GIS, with the help of this user interface. And the third level is if I have to do certain kind of modeling or programming in GIS to solve that water resources or hydrological problem, then I have to do certain kind of programming also. So it is a little bit difficult. I have to have the knowledge of programming or coding. Okay, so generally we are doing first and second level of integration of GIS and a model in comparison to the third one because it is a little bit difficult kind of integration. So like there are a number of use of the, if I want to know the slope, aspect, drainage basin and watershed boundary, drainage network, that also we can have from DEM, channels, modeling of hydrological. So there are a number of uses of DEMs in case of hydro or otherwise also. If you want to know the slope of any area or other purpose, so you can do that. You want to know the aspect. So all that is possible if we have a DEM of that particular area. Now another thing which again I will say that if any one of you are having background in water resources, those can understand. But like we were doing rainfall distribution map with the help of these polygons. Memory. So for each and every, like you can see the boundary of a rain catchment, and I want to know how much rainfall is there. If suppose there is one rain gauge, then I can say that that rain gauge is representing the rainfall of that particular catchment. But if I am having more than one rain gauge, then I have to give the weight of each rain gauge to that particular catchment. Manually, I have to draw the polygons. You can see here, very difficult sometimes. But once I am having in GIS, I have digitized my location of rain gauge, like you can see 6 rain gauge. So these polygons directly we can draw in a GIS, directly. We need not to worry anything. Only we have to digitize the location. So that is one of the advantage I can say of GIS, like in case of this rainfall value for the whole catchment. So the middle one will be, I have to take the full value of it. For certain, it is only certain percentage. That percentage I can know through GIS easy. So weight of each and every rain gauge, how much will be there for that particular catchment. In that way, we can compute. Similarly, here if you see in some of the exercise related to hydrology, I want to know how much first order streams. You can see red one. When two streams are meeting, they are called as second order streams. So earlier what we were doing, we were digitizing, or not digitizing, but we were creating a drainage map and then manually giving these numbers. Then we want to know the length of each and every order stream. First order streams, what is the length for certain type of modeling. But once I am having all that in digital form, then GIS will create a map in which it will show that first order streams, second order streams, and length of each and order streams. So earlier, whatever I was doing in say 4, 5, 6 days, that I can now do in few minutes. If I am having a drainage map with me. If I am not, then also creation of a drainage map will not take that much of time. So all that calculation, GIS will ordering, length of each order stream, number of each order streams, all that are required for certain kind of modeling. So that's what I was saying that earlier also we were doing the same thing. We were estimating or computing the length of each order through sometimes thread or curvimeter manually. But once we are using GIS, we can do that accurately and easily. So that is the advantage of GIS. So whatever traditionally we were using earlier, that we can do in a better way and fast, accurately through GIS. Okay, so this way we can create database in GIS. Now I will give you one simple example. Like we are using one SCS approach, which is based on curve number. And curve number depends upon land use, land cover, and soil. Okay, and it is commonly assigned based on the information acquired from field surveys. So, for establishment of the curve number of a basin, the information of hydrological soil group is required, which we can get from soil map, hydrological conditions, which are there on the basis of rainfall, and land use land. So once I have created all these in GIS, I can know the curve number of a particular grid or area. So how we can do that? You can see here. So this approach actually computes the runoff on the basis of precipitation, initial abstraction, and surface retention. And surface retention is related to curve number. You can see here. So if I am having curve number, then I can know the S. If I know the S, then I can put in that equation, and I know the precipitation or rainfall, then I can compute the Q. So my main job is to compute the CA or curve number. So how I can do that? Here. Better I will show you in the next slide. I have a soil map, I have a land use map. If I am crossing these two, I am getting like for land use class as 1, hydrological soil group as 0 or A, then I know the curve number for that in a table. So I have to link these three and I can create a curve number. So that is the advantage of GIS. I know all the layers. I want to create a number map, so I can do that by crossing these three information which I have generated in a GIS. And then putting here the curve number, I can produce S map, and then using that S map or P map, P is a precipitation map, I can compute the runoff. Okay, so this is a simple example of creating the layers and then integrating them and getting some certain kind of output, runoff volume computation. Input is rainfall map, land use map, soil map, and crossing, etc. Analysis in GIS and getting runoff. Okay. So, just quickly before I conclude, I will tell you something more about developing geodatabase, GIS database for power sector. So, for power distribution network, we can develop database through GPS survey, through some maps in GIS, and then we can do the analysis in GIS from power distribution or from power sector point. So consumers are mapped in a corresponding electricity network. If there is any expansion in that particular locality or area or city, that can be computed or mapped using remote sensing, and that can be added to the whole network. So all that can be created in GIS, like customer information system, asset management, outage management, utility billing system. So all that now we can create in GIS. So most of the work now in every sector is handled through GIS. We are creating GIS maps for all the applications, and then we are using them. So availability of accurate GIS-based distribution network map, proper GIS and creation of accurate digital base map for distribution network, etc., etc. So all that can be generated in GIS, and output can be GIS map display, GIS map navigation, GIS map query, upstream tracing of a consumer, special query of GIS map, display all consumer getting power from a substation. On that we can do that in a GIS. Display as consumers fed from a feeder, display all consumer connected to a power transformer. Like this is the whole system that we can map in a GIS. Through remote sensing also we can identify high tension lines, etc. this way. So now using remote sensing in GIS, we can create database of a distribution and all that, and then we can do the analysis in GIS. So GIS application will facilitate online query with a graphic display of network section showing the particular network element and their attributes. Customer information system we can generate. They can be used for energy audit, load management, network planning and analysis. Develop of a this I think I have covered that networking and all that. Transmission system. GIS can play a major role in designing, planning, polygon mapping, route identification, cost benefit analysis. Some more insight will be given in another lecture also that how we can use. But basically all that layers which are required from transmission or distribution point of view, we can generate in a GIS. Satellite image, topography, longitude, latitude, all that we can use. So only thing in whatever scale, whatever grid form, whatever grid size, all the informations are required, that we have to do in a GIS. Okay, so we will not go into detail. So finally, I can say that if I am using a GIS, particular to hydrological, will depend availability of adequate data. In any study, adequate data if there, then it is very easy for us. So first thing is we have to have availability of data. And remote sensing, of course, can play a very pivotal role. And data banks should provide all data. If those data are available, then I need to worry for the data input. There are a number of now portals and platforms where we can get all these data layers, which again I will say will be covered tomorrow in open source databases. Another difficult task, if I have seen in GIS incorporating in water resources modeling, is interfacing. I have told you that some interfaces have been prepared, but still there are some models, hierarchical models, which are not interfaced with the GIS. Decision support system. If I am planning, putting a decision on a map, and I want to see what will be the changes, what will be the consequences of that change, that I can see in DSS. And accordingly, I can apply them. Alternatives, different alternatives. Suppose in some area I want to propose afforestation. What will be the changes because of the afforestation? Suppose I have proposed some kind of crop rotation. What will be the effect of those changes? That I can see that. Then accordingly, that decision I can apply. Okay. So another area of potential research, like we have to develop expert system, which of course requires some kind of computer or programming knowledge. So that also is possible. So through that computer background people, we can generate some software like we are doing in our institute, creating a DSS in which computer experts are working along with us. So we are guiding from hydrology point of view, and they are having the background of computer system or creating or coding that in a system. So they are creating a DSS. Okay. So this is the scope for future work in the field of GIS and water resources management.